Okay, in this lesson, we're going to talk about adding and subtracting rational expressions that have the same denominator. So just recall, though, from 2 semesters ago when you were asked to add something like, let's say, 3/7 plus 5/7. Let's just say 3/7 plus 5/7. All right, so notice that the denominators are the same. So if you recall, you have 3 partitions of 7 and then 5 partitions of 7. So altogether you have 8 partitions of 7. So basically you said 3 plus 5 is 8. Now, mistake people make is they want to say 7 plus 7 is 14. You cannot do that. Remember, you're adding or subtracting, and when you add or subtract fractions, your partitions have to be the same number. So you have maybe if I can draw it like this, let's say you had 7 rows here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you have 3 that are shaded. All right, so let's say those 3. So that right here represents 3/7. And over here, you're going to add 5/7. So I'm going to draw 7 rows, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this time 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this time I'm going to add 5/7. And in terms of what's shaded, remember each of these rows represents a 7. So that's written by a partition of 7. So each one represents a 7th, okay? So that's 1/7, 1/7, 1/7 is 3/7. 1/7, 1/7, 1/7, 1/7, and 1/7 is 5/7. So altogether, how many 7ths do I have? Remember, partitions of 7. How many 7ths do I have? I have that is shaded. I have 8 7ths that are shaded, okay? So just remember, when adding fractions, so if you can visualize this, it helps. When adding fractions, you leave the denominator as that denominator. Don't add them up. You only add the numerator. Okay, so 5 plus 3 is 8. Okay, so now when we're talking about rational expression, we're going to use the same idea. So let's look at this example. So we're going to either add or subtract, whatever the operation is. Okay, so number 1, we have a plus 1 divided by 13 plus 8 divided by 13. Okay, so now what you could have done here also, and I should have mentioned it, so you could say 3 plus 5 over 7, which is 8 over 7. So that's how we got 8 over 7. So basically what you're going to do here, since you have some expressions that are just not numbers, they involve variables, you're going to rewrite this as one fraction. So this becomes a plus 1 plus 8, so you're going to add the numerators together, divided by the common denominator, which is 13. And then combine your like terms, and you get a plus 9 over 13. All right? Now, you can't do anything else to this, so at some point I'm going to write the steps, but at some point you want to factor as much as possible. So whenever you get to this point, you want to factor. Okay? So a plus 9, that's an a. I can't do anything with, so you're done. So that's the answer. Okay, number 2. Let's suppose we have 4m divided by 3n. That's an n, that's an m. And you're adding that to 5m divided by 3n. So notice the denominators are the same, so you add their numerators. So 4m plus 5m divided by 3n. So that's 8m divided by 3n, and I can't reduce. All right? So at some point you want to reduce, you want to simplify if possible. So it's going to say add, subtract, and simplify. Okay, so simplify your answer if possible. Okay, so just like before, I can't reduce 8 with any factor down here. There's a factor in the m. There's no factor of m down there. All right, so far it's no big deal. So far it's easy. Okay, number 3. All right, suppose we have 4m divided by m minus 6, and you're subtracting 24 divided by m minus 6. So 4m divided by m minus 6, subtract 24 divided by m minus 6. All right, so the denominators are the same, so you're going to write this as one fraction. So you're going to say 4m minus 24 over m minus 6. Okay, now, just as these were the answers, you've got to and the reason why you stopped here, you couldn't simplify further, was because you could, oops, kind of messed this up. This is 8 plus 9. Is because you couldn't factor anything else. You couldn't reduce anything else. But over here, when we talk about the steps, over here, you could factor this. So remember in previous lessons, you factor to simplify this rational expression, you factor. So I can factor out of 4, so I get 4 times m minus 6 divided by m minus 6, and then notice that the m minus 6 is divided out, and you're left with ones in their place, and so the answer is just 4 times 1 over 1, which is just 4. That's your answer. Okay, number 4. Suppose we had 9 divided by 3 plus y plus y plus 1 divided by y plus 3. Okay, so y plus, let's just leave it like that. Okay, so I want you to notice though, you see this y plus 3 and this 3 plus y, they're the same thing. So I'm adding two fractions whose denominators are the same. So I'm going to add their numerators. I get 9 plus y plus 1 divided by y plus 3. All right, and so when I add these, I get y plus 10 divided by y plus 3, and nothing else you can do. And so you're done. So remember, you look at your factors. The factor up here is y plus 10. There's no factor y plus 10 in the denominator. Now again, I'm going to mention this again based on what we talked in a previous lesson, that you see this y right here. Don't divide this y with this y because those are not factors. Remember, factors are separated by products. That's a plus symbol right here. Okay? So y plus 10 is a factor. There's no y plus 10 occurring as a factor in the denominator. All right, let's look at number 5. Suppose we had 5x squared plus 4x divided by x minus 1, and you're subtracting 6x plus 3 divided by x minus 1. All right, now listen carefully as we do this so you don't mess up. All right, so my denominators are the same, so now I can write this as one fraction. All right, now be careful. This one right here, when I go back to the previous one we did, that one was no issue right here. That was no issue because I was subtracting, I was saying 4m subtract a monomial. See, that's a monomial. That's one term. And I get this. Here, though, what's happening is that I have in my numerator, if I write this as one fraction, I have 5x squared plus 4x subtract a binomial. So not only am I subtracting 6x, but I am also subtracting 3. That's what this says. I am subtracting 3. So what you need to do when you rewrite this like this, when you write this as one fraction, is write this in parentheses. You're subtracting 6x plus 3. That's what you're subtracting. Okay, so it's a good idea to do that. Otherwise, you're going to have an error at one of your signs, and then all that's being divided by x minus 1. Okay, now remember this idea from last semester. Now you can get rid of the parentheses using a distributive property. So you can get rid of the parentheses using a distributive property. And I get 5x squared plus 4x minus 6x minus 3 all over x minus 1. And see this right here? That kind of makes sense now. See this right here? That kind of makes sense because what was happening, remember, you were subtracting, not only were you subtracting 6x right here, but you were also subtracting a positive 3. And when I subtract a positive 3, I get a negative 3. Okay? All right, now combined like terms, I get, I'm going to go ahead and write it here. I get 5x squared. Now positive 4x and a negative 6x is a negative 2x. And then subtract 3 over x minus 1. So that's where I'm at. Okay, now remember though, the next step is to factor, remember this right here. So the next step is to factor as much as you can and then simplify. So right here, see this trinomial? Let's see if I can factor this. So I'm going to get 2 binomials over x minus 1. And so let's see what I get. So that'll be 5x, that's x. Let's go ahead and put the 3 here, the 1 there. And the last sign's negative. That means these signs in here are different. And this one's going to be the negative 1. Nope, this will be the negative 1. This will be the positive 1. Okay, so check your work. 5x times x is 5x squared. A positive 3 times a negative 1 is a negative 3. The outer is a negative 3x. The inner is a positive 3x. When I add them up, I get a negative 2x. And now notice what happens. These right here divide out, and you're left with 5x plus 3. So that's your answer. All right, that's number 5. 5x plus 3. All right, let's look at the next one. Okay, number 6. All right, let's suppose we had 4a divided by a squared plus 2a minus 15. Subtract 12 divided by a squared plus 2a minus 15. All right. So again, notice the denominators are exactly the same. So since the denominators are the same, I am going to write this as one fraction. All right, so I'm going to get 4a minus 12. Now notice again, that's a monomial, so that's the easy kind. If this was something other than monomial, you would really need to put that in parentheses so you don't mess up. So 4a subtract this one term, so that's 12. So my numerator, I get 4a subtract 12 over a squared plus 2a minus 15. All right, so step 1, remember, is to write as one fraction. All right, now again, that's assuming, I'm going to put right here, same denominators. Now in the next lesson, the denominators will not be the same, so we're going to remember how to do that. Remember, that's where you have to write equivalent fractions. So write as one fraction. So that's what I did here. Write as one fraction. Then step 2 is to factor numerator and denominator. Oops, that's denominator in this case. Now, remember, let me go ahead and mention this as well. Be a little bit careful because in this step 2, what I did was I put that in parentheses and then I distributed and then I combined like terms. So maybe I need to say right here, step 1, write as one fraction. Step 2, combine like terms if necessary in the numerator. So let's do that. So that will be step 2 right here. Combine like terms in the numerator if possible. Okay, so combine like terms in the numerator if possible. And let's make this step 3. So step 3 would be to factor the numerator and denominator. All right, so here when I wrote this as one fraction, these were not like terms and these are not like terms either. So I'm done with step 2. Step 3, now I'm going to go ahead and factor. Over here in the numerator, I can factor out of 4. I'm left with 4 times a minus 3. In the denominator, I'm going to factor this as 2 binomials. Let's see, that's an a and an a, 5 and 3. And the 5 has to be positive and the 3 has to be negative. All right, always check yourself. A times a is a squared. A positive 5 times a negative 3 is a negative 15. And then the outer and the inner. So the inner is 5a, the outer is a negative 3a. When I add them up, I get a positive 2a. And notice right away, these factors divide out. I left one in their place. So I'm left with factors of 1. So I get 4 times 1 is 4 over a plus 5 times 1 is a plus 5. So there's your answer. Okay. And now remember step, so factor numerator, and then step 4 would be to simplify your answer. So simplify. You're going to simplify by reducing your common factors. All right. Number 7. Suppose we had, let's see. All right. Suppose we had 2x plus 3. 2x plus 3 divided by x squared minus x minus 30. Subtract x minus 2 divided by x squared minus x minus 30. All right, so the numbers are the same, so I'm going to write this as one fraction. Don't forget, though, I'm not just subtracting a monomial, but I'm subtracting a binomial. So I'm not just subtracting x, but I'm subtracting a negative 2. Okay? So it's a good idea, remember what I just said, so it's a good idea to write this like this. 2x plus 3, so that's going to equal 2x plus 3, subtract x minus 2 in parentheses. Okay? All over the denominator, x squared minus x minus 30. All right, now get rid of the parentheses. So that will be part of step 2 right here. Combine like terms in the numerator and the denominator. So get rid of the parentheses. So I'm going to get, let me do that here. So I'm going to get 2x plus 3. When I subtract x, I get negative x. When I subtract the negative 2, I get a positive 2. All over x squared minus x minus 30. Combine like terms. I get 2x minus x is x. 3 and a positive 2 is 5. You get x plus 5. Now be careful. See, if I had messed up anywhere right here, this would have been wrong, and nothing would have been nothing would have reduced. And chances are something's going to reduce. Okay, not always, but something. Chances are something will reduce. Something in the numerator will reduce with something in the denominator. So be careful. Remember, this is the second example we did where we had to put this in parentheses. If you don't put in parentheses, you're probably going to mess up. You don't have to. So if you can think of this as saying subtract x and write negative x, and subtract negative 2 and write positive 2, you're good. But if you have to put this, then put this. All right, and then x squared minus x minus 30. Now step 3. So I did combine like terms. Now step 3 is to factor numerator and denominator. So when I factor the numerator, it's already factored, so I can't do anything else to it. But the denominator I can factor. And let's see, I need the negative 30, so I need, let's say, a 6 and a 5, and the 6 will be negative and the 5 will be positive, and check. X times x, x squared, negative 6 times a positive 5 is a negative 30. The outer is positive 5x, the inner is a negative 6x. When I add them up, I get a negative x. And then finally, see, you have x plus 5 as common factors, so those divide out. Now be careful. If this is what you write, your chances are you're going to say the answer is x minus 6, but the answer is not x minus 6. The answer is not x minus 6, so be careful. When you do this, make sure you put ones as their factors, because you're left with a factor of 1 when you do this. So the answer is not x minus 6, but the answer is 1 divided by x minus 6. That's the answer. All right, that was number 7. Okay, let's look at number 8. So remember, all we're doing now is the same denominator. All right, so let's suppose we had this one. Suppose we had 2x squared divided by x minus 5. Subtract 25 plus x squared divided by x minus 5. All right. Okay, so my denominators are the same. So all I got to do now is write as one fraction. So I'm going to get, now remember, always look at this. This is not a monomial. This is a binomial. So you're subtracting a 25 and you're also subtracting an x squared. So I get 2x squared minus, in parentheses, 25 plus x squared. So if you need to, put that in parentheses, all over my common denominator, which is x minus 5. All right, now get rid of the parentheses, distribute the negative 1. I get 2x squared minus 25 minus x squared. All right, now you could have gone from here to here if you are careful. You're subtracting 25, so that's minus 25. You're subtracting a positive x squared, so that's a negative x squared, all over x minus 5. Now, so we're still in step 2 right here. So step 2 is now combined like terms. So 2x squared minus x squared is x squared minus 25 over x minus 5. All right, now step 3, remember, is to factor numerator and denominator. So my numerator, that's the difference of 2 squares. So I get x minus 5 times x plus 5. I can't factor x minus 5, so I'm going to leave it alone. And now reduce. So that will be step 4. Step 4 is to simplify. So I see an x minus 5 occurring as factors in both numerator and denominator. They're left with factors of 1, and notice 1 times x plus 5 is x plus 5 divided by 1, but that is just x plus 5. So the answer is x plus 5. All right, and let's just do one more. Let's look at this one. Suppose we had, that'd be number 9. Suppose we had 5x plus 4 divided by x minus 1, subtract 2x plus 7 divided by x minus 1. Okay, so I'm going to write, so since I already have common denominators, I'm going to write this as one fraction. So we get 5x plus 4. And again, I'm subtracting something other, that's a 7 here. I'm subtracting something other than a monomial. So you may want to put that in parentheses. If not, you got to be careful. I'm subtracting 2x, and then I'm subtracting a positive 7. So minus 2x plus 7 in parentheses over x minus 1. Now get rid of the parentheses. We're on step 2. Get rid of the parentheses. I get 5x plus 4. All right, when I distribute the negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x. Negative 1 times a positive 7 is a negative 7, all over x minus 1. Combine like terms. 5x minus 2x is 3x. 4 minus 7 is a negative 3, all over x minus 1. So that's where I'm at. Okay, now the next step, remember, is to factor numerator and denominator. So the only thing I can factor is the numerator. So that's 3 times x minus 1 divided by x minus 1. And now simplify. Reduce common factors. So these divide out, and you're left with, don't forget to put the factors of 1 in their place. And so I'm left with 3 times 1 divided by 1, which is just 3. Okay, so that's the end of that lesson. So basically all you did, this lesson is not that difficult because the denominators had the same factor in it. The denominators were the same. The next lesson, or a future lesson, the denominators will be different. So it's a little bit more challenging because you have to find the LCD just like you did in a previous course and write equivalent fractions. Okay, but we are done with this one.